Good evening. Welcome to the February 25th, 2019 meeting of the Coeur d'Alene Parks and Recreation Commission. Melissa, let's have roll call, please.
Commissioner Cranston.
Here.
Commissioner McDowell.
Here.
Commissioner Lean. Commissioner Tate.
Here.
Commissioner Hill. Commissioner Wood.
Here.
Commissioner Edinger. Commissioner Kinnard.
Okay. Thank you, Melissa. Given the fact that the commission does not have a quorum tonight, I am not going to be opening the meeting for any official commission business. However, we will be continuing on with our advertised open house tonight, an opportunity to have informal discussion with the community and opportunity to review the updates to the Atlas Waterfront project. And preceding kind of the informal open house, we will have a presentation by city staff and the design team of what has been updated since the last time it's been viewed in public. So with that, Mike.
Do we know what the rebroadcast schedule for the presentation would be for those that would like to be able to see this on a cable rebroadcast opportunity?
So the presentation, Commissioner, will be live, as it always is, and then I don't know what the rebroadcast schedule is, but it's there all the time. When I go back and look at it, it's available when you just go on to our site and then click video, and then you can see it.
Okay, so folks that weren't able to make it here tonight will be able to see the same presentation.
And then additionally tonight they'll see our website link to, if they see that, they can directly contact us and then have a say and let us know what they like about the presentation or don't like or have different ideas.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
With that, Bill, then I'll let you go ahead and maybe describe how the presentation will be presented, and we'll close it out.
So tonight what we're going to do, everyone, is Phil Boyd from West Comer will be here with Del Hatch from Bernardo Wills, and they're going to walk through a presentation about the information that we've gathered from the public about what we're doing. We've made some changes already. We've already shown this to the Centennial Trail Foundation. We've shown it to our Ped Bike Committee as well. And with some of their input, we've already made some tweaks. So we're going to continue to tweak this with everybody's input. The way we're going to do this, Troy's going to talk a little about the process and where we came to. I'm going to talk about some of the public outreach we've had, and then Phil and his team will get up and then discuss all of the changes we've made and what's coming into the future. And then after he's done with his presentation, we'll go around to the back of the room, and you can look at these poster boards, and there's comment cards for you to tell us what you like, what you thought we might have missed, and what you might want to see different. So that's the whole process. Okay. So Commissioner, do you want to close your meeting?
Yes, the meeting is closed.
Okay.
Again, welcome. My name is Troy Tymason, City Administrator. Sorry to speak this way, but the microphone needs to pick this up so that we can have this for a good broadcast. Parks and Recreation Commissioners that are able to attend, great to see you. Let me start by saying that on behalf of the Mayor and Council, this is our #1 item on our list of to-dos, and it is moving down the path quite well. At the same time, I'd like to say that nothing is set in stone on this, nothing has been chiseled into rock, and that the recommendations coming from Parks and Recreation is greatly received. The inputs from our great folks that came out tonight is greatly received. We want to make the very most of this project that we can. It's probably one of the first and last times we'll ever have acquired a mill site. We did that in May of 2018. We spent approximately $7,850,000 just to buy the land. The city is looking for a payback on that. So that is why we are here. Bill gave an overview of the program. What we'd like to do is understand how this came to fruition. The city of Coeur d'Alene went to work and bought a railroad. That put us in the middle of any transaction that would occur out at the Atlas Mill site. This property has been vacant for more than a decade. We had the mission of going into it looking for a way in which to help our community. Developers were not able to make this pencil. There were a number of them that the city worked with that took a look at and couldn't make the numbers work out. And so here we are today after acquiring it. Obviously, a significant partner in this is Ignite Coeur d'Alene. They are all about development. We are here tonight to speak more to the public space side of it. And as you've heard, or I'd like to confirm, that the city of Coeur d'Alene and the elected officials are preserving the waterfront for the public. We are here to talk about green space and trails and great things, where once upon a time, had a developer been in there, from my pro forma model, developing the waterfront would be much more lucrative and a return on investment, but that is not going to happen. So since purchasing it, staff, working with a number of design professionals, have brought forward a master plan, looked at the financial feasibility, and at the end of this last calendar year, put together the extension of the Lake District, the extension of the River District, and created a new urban renewal district known as Atlas that covers this entire site so that we have a funding model to get a bunch of this work done and use tax increment financing to help us with that. Again, tonight we're going to look at some designs, we're going to look at some ideas and take into consideration all the other work that has come before us with the public on what should happen out at the Atlas Waterfront project. Everything at the end of the day needs to be approved via Ignite and, of course, to our elected officials, the City Council. We would like to be building this in 2019, 2020 for the public space, and it doesn't feel like we're coming out of winter quite yet. Doesn't feel like we're going to be under construction, but we are looking forward to work being done in this public space in this year. The upland, the area that would be for the development side of this, is still being looked at and is a function of our Planning and Zoning Commission along with our elected officials. So you may all have great questions. We would like you to stay focused on the public space tonight. Ignite will look at that, Council will look at that, and obviously the public will have some inputs. But tonight, if we could stay focused, that would be great. We need to sell some land. We would propose requests for proposals coming in. That is a whole big another subject that for our purposes tonight, this city administrator would like you to keep you focused on the left side of that. So again, I want to thank you for all that you do. Thank the public for being out here tonight. I'm going to reiterate, nothing is in stone. The public brings us great ideas and suggestions. It will depend on funding, and you will hear that from our consultants. If you don't, let me reiterate, it will depend on funding. And with that, I'd like to bring up Mr. Greenwood.
Thank you, Troy.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the process here as how we designed this and went through. We started way back in 2018, and you can see we went through all of these meetings where we had some presentations to the public. We had some input from the public. We actually even took a waterfront tour, which was interesting because from that side, you really get to see the erosion issues that we're going to have to deal with. And those are going to be major things, and Phil and his team are going to talk about that. So where we are today is down here. And so we've gone through all of these things, and we went and talked with the Trail Foundation. And as I said earlier, we've already made some modifications with their input. Thanks to my old boss, Doug Eastwood, had some great ideas, and so we implemented those. And then our Ped Bike Committee had some things to say about the trail connection out of this green belt up to where Riverstone is. And so they've incorporated that. You'll see that this evening. So right here, we are here this evening. And then we go, you go, the commission workshop with the council. And then we come back here next month to take the information that we're going to get tonight and then massage this in to the overall design and see what it is we hear from everybody tonight and throughout the next month and how we get information from them through emails. And then on to the funding with Ignite, that's what Troy was talking about. We don't know exactly how much money and how far this money is going to go. So we hope to do more in the public space, but that's up to the elected and Ignite to make those decisions. But your input is really important, and so is the public's input on all this. And then we take it back to council. We'll get some opportunities, or the public will have some opportunities, I'm sorry, to look at this again at your next workshop or your next meeting. And then council will look at it some. The decision on the design won't come at this meeting, I don't believe. That's a little early. I think we need to look at this a little slower. They want to go out to bid and have this bid documents opened up in the first part of July. So we've slowed the process down a tad. We were looking at trying to have this go out to bid in June, but we recognize the importance of slowing this down so we can have everybody have an opportunity to see this with fresh eyes and not feel rushed. So with that, I will bring up Phil at this point and his team, and then let's move on with the presentation.
Thank you, Bill.
Good evening, commissioners. I've got quite a presentation to go through here tonight, and I want to start, like a lot of the presentations we work on, is the objective, so folks know, and it is a little awkward in an open house to have my back to the public, so I apologize. But speaking directly at the commissioners, our objective tonight is to provide conceptual level detail through plans, sketches, imagery, so you have as good an understanding that we can present, and then understand what we're showing, we're trying to depict, and then of course give us feedback. Because as Bill mentioned, and Troy, this is a refinement process, and it starts with ideas, and it gets refined and refined and refined, and eventually we get to the correct idea. So I'll start off. Chairman Cranston, I don't know if questions are appropriate as we move through this or not from your board.
Well, we're not going to be in a meeting format. I think let you get through your presentation.
Okay.
I know we're all anxious to kind of mingle with the community out there and,
Okay.
and get their feedback on what they see and their ideas, and maybe at that time we can interact and
Yep.
everybody else and
Yes,
their
and,
questions answered.
and at the end, I'll talk a little bit about our open house format, because we have a number of staff here to help with that.
It also might be good if you could highlight the evolution, the changes since our last viewing of this a month ago, kind of identify how those ideas that have come since have been incorporated and what kind of changes have been brought about.
Yes, sir, I will do that. I'll start out with this overview, and you guys have seen this before. There's a little bit of revision that I'll show you right down here. Originally, you might recall this road came in this direction, continued on. In one of the very early renderings, it followed the Centennial Trail route out to Beebe. In another version, it took a lower road. Then we had a loop road to try to get folks down to the east end of the project. But that was one of the comments, Commissioner McDowell, that we had received both at the Centennial Trail Foundation meeting and at the Parks and Rec meeting. After that, when our steering committee meeting met that the mayor had put together, we took that feedback and modified it. Actually showed this image at the very beginning of our steering committee meeting, and everybody seemed to like it. And I'll get into some more details about why that parking lot is there, why is it so close to the water, and a lot of the design philosophy behind this. I apologize if it's a lot of detail, but we certainly believe that providing as much information as we can is important, and then folks are all kind of on the same page. The one comment I will make, and Troy alluded to this, early in the master planning process, remember, financial feasibility had to be achieved by Ignite in order to expand the urban renewal districts. When the council and the mayor's direction was, well, let's pull out the 3,700 feet of a waterfront for public, it made this quite a challenge to achieve that. We actually asked the public during that process, would you be willing to accept higher densities, which clearly we see here, in exchange for preserving the waterfront? And the answer was yes, they would do that. Would you be willing to accept some commercial parcels near the waterfront? Because obviously those are valuable parcels. And they said, yes, we would be willing to do that. And granted, this is a cross-section of folks that attended the meeting, so not a scientific measurement, but certainly that was the feedback we received. So that's just a general commentary about the project overview. A few site facts. The project that we're working in is actually 60 acres. The number that you were probably most familiar of is the city purchased 47 acres, but they actually owned a parcel of property, the railroad corridor that Troy alluded to, that ran through it. So that's part of the planning area. During the plating process, there was, and when I say plating process, we had to reconfigure the boundaries of the parcels that existed there so they coincided with the urban renewal district boundaries. We actually suggested that the city vacate a portion of the southeast right-of-way because then it would become sellable property and someone would actually take care of it as opposed to it just being this no man's land. And I think we've all seen what happens in no man's land. Additionally, there's portions of the Prairie Trail that end up in the planning area, so we can't just ignore it. So the planning area is about 60 acres, 15 acres of waterfront park. That's a big number, but it goes all the way, that's from the ordinary high water mark, so don't look at it as necessarily completely usable space. But there is 15 acres, 3,700 feet of shoreline, and 10 acres of upland. This area over here we refer to as Mount Hink. There's about 10 acres up there, which, based on our current understanding of the soils, will eventually turn into public open space because it's too expensive to remediate it. And then as Troy mentioned, the expansion and creation of the districts. I like these pictures because I like construction work and engineering work, and this demonstrates what we did with I-90 fill. Early in the process, shortly after the city bought this, we were aware that material was being moved off of I-90 and taken to a pit and just wasted in the pit. But it was structural soils. And so I had worked this out with Troy Tymeson and said, gosh, this seems like an idea that might be worth getting that material and filling the site we need to be filled in a structural way, very cost effectively. We estimate it saved somewhere around $1 million in site remediation work. And this is one of those things that Troy mentioned earlier. Developers don't always have the ability to respond very quickly and have those relationships with other entities to make stuff like that happen. So there's just a couple of images that shows what it looked like and what it currently looks like now, except for the snow. So I mentioned the financial feasibility report. When we started with the an original public space concept, we had lots of goodies in it. Amenities, park amenities, public space amenities. Unfortunately, the numbers wouldn't work. We could not get the financial feasibility of the project to work. So you know, in the simplest terms, you have two things. You have income and expenses. And so we had to keep pulling things out of the public space. The amenities had to get removed. And so we ultimately ended up with a configuration that Del Hatch called the Clean and Green project. And at $3.5 million, you think, gosh, that doesn't seem like that should go a long ways. It is 15 acres of park and 3,700 feet of waterfront. Significant portions of it are eroded, and there's a tremendous amount of site development topography that needs to be fixed. So that's what's rendered here, and you can kind of see it's a pretty lean project. It consists of a trail that comes off of the Prairie Trail at Riverstone. It's a paved wheel path, 12 feet wide, continues on. It's that kind of salmon color, and then stops at the river's edge development. This blue color here is the graveled pedestrian path, 8 feet wide, and it meanders along the shoreline. So folks that are walking are really getting the experience of being near the water. There was quite a bit of shoreline restoration in the project, an irrigation system. Obviously, we need things to grow. Planting grass, some trees up in here, a restroom and a picnic shelter, and then one access down here. So the Clean and Green project is nice. Don't mistake me that it would be a beautiful addition. But there were things that we pulled out that had to in order for the financial feasibility to work. So one that would not be in it, and this is the east end of the project. To get you guys your bearings, this is the Prairie Trail. Riverstone is just back behind those trees. And this is the east end of the project. And under the Clean and Green scenario, this is what the east end of the project would look like in 2020. Because that was one area that didn't have a tremendous amount of erosion. And so There's not much that needs to happen there. Looking up or downstream, this is looking towards the west to get your bearings again. Celtics Way is off in the upper right hand here. You can see the Tonka toys down there doing their work. A lot of this would stay just as you see it. There might be a little remediation work here because we've got an unstable shoreline. There's some significant erosion in these areas, more significant there, and certainly down in here. So we would fix the worst areas, but some of the toe erosion that's caused by boat wakes would have to wait to the future, which is not an efficient way to conduct business and build things, but that was the nature of the clean and green. This is a snapshot of a really bad erosion area. And for folks that visit down there, this is also one of the favorite spots for people to camp and swim from. There's frequently a tent in there. Later on, you'll see a picture with a tent in there. But this is that particular area. What would happen in the clean and green version of the majority of these slopes would just get laid back. They're overly steep, so they would get laid back to an appropriate grade, vegetated, seeded, and that's the way that they would be. A little bit of budget in here to do some steps in this worst area here. And again, to get your bearings, here's the waterfront street. This is one of the roads that's pointing down towards the water. And in that particular area, we would lay that slope back and probably build some steps in there. So there at least would be one access in the clean and green version so folks could get down to the water. And just a note right here, this is non-native shoreline soil material. That's probably pretty evident to most people looking at it because it's so fine-grained. That's not typically what you would find right at the edge of the water. So at some point in the mill's history, it was deposited there. This is another area a little further downstream in that same area. It's kind of in here. And you can see that these trees are almost ready to topple in. Again, lots of erosion has occurred there. This is during low water. So some of these photographs, you guys will see me switch back and forth between low water and high water. But this is the type of fix that would occur along here. We would reestablish, those trees will come out, the slope would be laid back, a little bit of toe rock armor in there, and then some vegetation put in there to stabilize that slope. So the Funded to Clean and Green project, that's the gist of what comes out of it. And again, you look at a $3.5 million price tag and think, gosh, that money's got to go, seems like it should go further than that, but it is a big site, and there's lots of things to touch in there. I also will say that these estimates that we put together were early on in the process, and they do have a conservative contingency number to them. And as the design gets refined, the cost estimates get refined. Part of what we'll hope to hear tonight is from the public during the open house you'll find out that there's some amenity that they're very attached to, and you think that it'll have a very high probability of success of potentially being funded, and we'll start working on cost estimates on that particular element to get it more refined so we can provide the decision makers better information as we move through this. So moving on to the potential additional improvements. Probably the first thing that jumps out to folks that we'll see is this set of docks here and this set of docks here. I will get to it, but it will be at the end of my presentation, just because I'm going to start from the east and work towards the west. The potential additional improvements are, again, roughly estimated about close to $3 million. The first one is a water access dog park. And during our times of working with in the community, we've heard that as a frequent request. Gosh, I wish I had somewhere to take my dog. Councilmember Miller and I and Bill Greenwood actually looked on a concept over on Blackwell Island because there's some city ownership over there. This is a really good spot for it. It's near the trail. It's near a lot of population density. Folks can get out, walk their dog, take it down, get it wet, and by the time you get home, hopefully the dog is dry. So that's one of the elements that we think the community has spoken in previous situations and asked for that. A beach with an accessible beach area, and I'll talk about that in a second. Some might say we have plenty of beach in Coeur d'Alene, but as the population grows, those beaches will get crowded. This, based on our soils investigation, used to be a beach, similar to NIC. The mills modified it into not a beach. So that's another future potential improvement. Accessible kayak and stand-up paddleboard launch, I'll talk about that. I'm going to talk about each of these in more detail and show you some images and design concepts. A natural style playground, landscape water feature, additional pedestrian accesses to the river, and you can see where bang, 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 when I hit that, 4 of them appeared right there. And in those 4 areas are some of the worst erosion on the site. And so I'll talk about this some more, but the philosophy behind building on the shoreline is don't disturb what's currently nicely vegetated and stable. We'll go in and touch areas that need to be touched. So we're killing 2 birds with a single stone. The Prairie Trail Underpass, Suzanne is going to become an active road, and currently there is no conflict there, but in the future there will be a conflict between pedestrian, bicyclists, and vehicles. So there's a potential to put an underpass there, and I'll show you some of that. So I'm going to start right down here on the east end with the water access dog park. This is the vicinity, the current condition, again at low water. You can see how the beach area there, the bathymetry, the area below the ordinary high water mark, is pretty flat. This is the type of beach you might expect. It won't be a sandy beach. You can see that it comes right off of the Centennial or the Prairie Trail down in this area. This is that same rendering I just showed you, but zoomed in so you have a little more clarity here. This is the current sidewalk up in Riverstone. The Prairie Trail is coming by. And as we all know, having been on parts of the trail, when folks stop to make a decision, what do? They stop in the middle of the trail and make their decision, which is not a good thing. The way that this is designed is this is a pullout here, essentially, for folks to get out of the way if you're walking. If you're riding and you know where you want to go, you could just drop down here on this bike trail. This is an accessible route. And when I use the word accessible, that means it's navigable, meets ADA standards, and all of the intention is all the facilities in this park would meet ADA standards. So you can see you could come down here, get onto this pedestrian trail here, or get into the dog park. There's a set of steps right here if you'd like to come down a set of steps. Quite a bit of retaining wall work that has to happen in here, but it has to happen one way or the other, so we're not adding a tremendous cost to be able to create a wide spot to get folks out of the flow of the stream, or the trail stream there. And then you can see the dog park down in here. This is the private development to the east, and the dog park would be boomed and fencing on both sides. Moving on to the west, let me back up. So just to give you your bearings, we were here. The dog park is in that area. You can see it stops right there, and then the entire rest of this is People Beach. Of course, I've had the comments, why are the people downstream of the dogs? Well, the people will always be downstream of the dogs, no matter where we put the dogs, because there's water accesses all the way down to the end of the project. This gives you an idea of how that beach can be restored. This black line depicts the ground under the water. You come out of the summer water level, there's a big mound here, and if you guys have, I know you've spent time down there, you've seen this. Then there is what was the old mill pond, and then it goes back, and here's the old railroad grade. And that's a cross section that I'm shown cut right here through the earth looking east. And you can see likely what happened is the material that used to be here is now here. And we confirmed that with a bunch of soil tests through that area. So the intention is to take portions of that are fine grain and topsoil, remove them. Portions that are appropriate beach material can stay here. If there's contamination in this area, it will have to be dealt with. And DEQ is currently working on soil samples that they've pulled through there and testing that. But the idea would be to take what currently looks like that and turn it into something that looks like that. Of course, you guys recognize that as an image from NIC Beach. And that red line depicts what the restored ground surface would look like. Another feature that Bill and I have talked about for years, and Doug Eastwood prior to him, is where is there an opportunity, or when will we find the appropriate opportunity to create an accessible beach area? And again, the opportunity for folks of all abilities, whether you're in a wheelchair or a walker, to get into the water. You can see the parking lot is here. And accessible parking locations would be here, and this blue depicts a paved surface. You come off the paved surface and drop right down into the accessible beach area right here. And this is a perspective rendering of it. You can see coming down to the beach area. You could come in this side. There would be concrete or a hard surface that you can navigate in a wheeled vehicle. It would be bigger than this because you can imagine that they're going to be, your folks are going to be down there with their families, and you don't want to have one narrow little path. And then there would be a ramp into the water where you could go in. There would be concrete in the water and be able to take your wheelchair in there, curbs around it so it can't float away, and potentially a barrier that would need to be maintained and removed by Bill's crews. But certainly in my travels working in this city and in other cities, this is an important feature. I feel like we've underserved in that category, and the bathymetry, again, the elevations of the ground below the water here really lend itself to be able to build cost-effectively a substantial facility that all folks could access. So we think that's an important feature. It works really well right here. It's right part of the main beach, very close to the parking area. Moving on into the park itself, the main part of the park, and you'll hear me refer to this as the park and sometimes these areas as the linkages, because you're linking activity zones. At some point, this is going to be a great commercial activity zone. This links to another great activity zone, which is a link to another zone, link to a commercial area, link to the park, and link over to Riverstone Park. So in this particular area of the park, this is a rendering, and again, I'll get you your bearings kind of squared away here. This is the road that comes into the parking lot. It's pretty shallow grade, 3.5% into the parking lot. This is a food truck area, which is something that Bill gets a lot of demand for in his parks, but this would be planned ahead. You come down the road, about 65 car parks here. You're right down close to the water, still above the 100-year floodplain, so the parking lot is not in the 100-year floodplain. This particular area right here is a hard surface with bollards in front of it, so the bollards for an emergency vehicle can be removed. They could get on the 12-foot wide path if need be and navigate their way down along the beach. You can also see this off-ramp, we'll call it, to the Prairie Trail that comes through these trees to bring you right down. If you happen to be headed eastbound, you can drop right in here. The parking lot, this is the picnic shelter and restrooms. This is a potential vendor building for kayaks, stand-up paddle boards. The play area right here, the playground. And the stand-up paddleboard kayak launch right here. Again, very close to the parking lot. There's an existing concrete boat launch there that we would repurpose. So rather than creating something new, repurpose it there. You can launch your kayak there, or you could launch it over at the beach. But there's ways to get to it. A lot of times you'll see folks pull their kayaks on a wheeled vehicle or wheeled trolley. They can do that and get into it. Some steps down to the beach right here. So right when you get out of your car, again, you get out of the flow of traffic and you stand here and make a decision. And you'll see that theme pretty consistently in our designs, is getting folks off the trails so they can make a decision and decide where to go, because not all the folks that experience this place live here. This is the commercial area and plaza here, gangway down to a potential set of docks and a little overlook in this area. So studying that a little bit closer, parking, 65 spaces. I mentioned the trail access, accessible routes to all the park features. So if you're in if you need an accessible route, you've got it to get there. I mentioned it earlier here down to the launch here, and you can see it in this view as well. This is the kayak launch here. That's an image of what a kayak launch would look like. Here's kind of a standard version where if you want to jump out there and you can get into your kayak. This is an accessible one where you pull up, get yourself onto the bench here, deploy the little bench there, get into your kayak, and off you go. So those are very popular. You can see it rendered here, and that's what the site looks like, and you can see why we like it. Because the grade currently drops there. We don't have to move a lot of material to get to it. You can see just the top of the concrete ramp here. So there's very little disturbance that occurs below the water, but the area needs some attention. So again, back to the philosophy, of disturbing areas that are currently disturbed or working in areas that are currently disturbed. And Ashley Williams, one of our engineers in our office, project engineer working on the waterfront, has spent a lot of time with the regulatory agencies and the Coeur d'Alene tribe, developing that mindset and just being very respectful of what's good there and not tearing it up unnecessarily. Moving on about the picnic shelters. The picnic shelter, that's the particular area here. Of course, the architects want to do something that speaks to the timber industry. That was one of the ideas they came up with. It looks like 2x4s to me, and maybe there's some more thinking we can put on here. You can see that this evokes a little different of a mill-type structure in the sheds that a lot of times you'd see on a mill site. That's a similar form to what's at the memorial to try to give you a scale perspective of it. But right in the middle there, and the activity, the playground, and then the vendor building here, close to the parking lot to get to. The food truck area, this is another element that Bill gets asked about. If it's going to exist, let's plan ahead and provide for it. Memorial Park actually has 2 food truck areas or stations in it. The power is there to handle the load that those put on the system. The food trucks could pull in here. You might have a gate on each end of this, so people can't just park there. But when the food truck shows up, they come in. There's 3 or 4 of them parked there. Maybe they provide their own tables and seating. But it creates a lot of activity. And you all have been to parks where there's food trucks, and it's great that you get things like the food truck, the kids playing, the picnic shelter being active. That park really starts to get some activity occurring in it. The playground, this is an element we heard earlier in one of the early processes all the way back to the master plan is don't put the colorful thing in there. Put something that is consistent with the timber theme. And this is actually elements you buy off the shelf. And it would be sitting right in that area in this perspective view and right here in the plan view. Up here at Suzanne, the potentials for crossing that. Now the deluxe version is to do this one on the left here. And this is an element we showed to the pedestrian bike committee. And of course not everybody likes that necessarily because of the money associated with it, because that is a fairly expensive element to construct. This is a project we did up near Sandpoint on Bottle Bay Road. And you did 10-foot height there. The one in this location would be lit. You design them so you can see through them, so there's not any blind spots in them. Obviously, you're separating vehicles with people and bikes. It's also an expensive element. This is, most of us have probably been on this one, the trail at Player Drive, where there's a chicane on each side of it to slow folks down. So that's another option here. And interestingly, the Ped Bike Committee, for the few comments we've heard back from them, they understand that this is expensive and maybe there's better places for park money to be spent and to go with a chicane here. But we're waiting on them to give us kind of a formal response. I want to talk about the trail cross sections. And there's a variety of conditions that exist here because of the topography I mentioned, where the road sits in relationship to the ordinary high water, the banks. In this particular area, we have the option of having steps into the water here or not. And this particular cross-section shows steps into the water. But you can see the elevation difference between the road and where the water is at. And the ability it gives us to separate the folks on wheels with the folks that are walking. And the idea is to create 2 different experiences. If you want the quiet walk on the graveled path, you can hang out down here. It's level with the plaza where you might, again, pull out, think about what you're going to do, go down to the water, get your feet in. The folks that are speeding through can be up here, but still they're even set below the roadway. And that roadway needs to be a little bit higher in order to accommodate some of the street grades up to Celtice. There's about 90 feet between Celtice and the water here. So there's a lot of grade for us to deal with. The section moving on to B here, because of the topography difference and how the trail or the road pushes close to the trail, we actually have some retaining walls, which is what that big number I showed you earlier in clean and green. Retaining walls are expensive but necessary in this situation. And this might be what that configuration looks like. Again, the road, the trail, The Ped Bike Committee made a good suggestion about moving this set of walls a little bit closer here. That's 4 feet, but they said, why not make it 6 feet to give a little bit more shy distance for the bikes and still create a nice experience for the folks. You can see the slope into the river, little rock armoring down there. And then the last one, section C here, looking west, the road, the trail, 3-to-1 slope, try to preserve some of the mature trees that exist there now, and then the soft trail really close to the water. And again, that's a theme, is putting the PEDs close to the water where you can. This slope has been laid back. Currently, it's nearly vertical. Moving on to this section of the project here where we have some shoreline stabilization that can be water access. This is, right behind it is the commercial parcel. There's a building that's been rendered in here, and here's 2 different scenarios. One, without steps into the water, and this one does have steps that kind of get you down to the water and maybe a platform down in there. But that's what that area looks like. It doesn't seem like it, maybe by the face of that picture, is unstable, but it is unstable, fine-grained soils. This is another one. And you guys can imagine what that is. I think Dell showed this at the last meeting, just folks scrambling down to get to the water. So let's structure it so they don't erode. In areas where these exist now, but we can't afford to put steps in there, we'll be restoring those and vegetating those. There's a number of them that exist along there. And this is the big one. This is an opportunity to really create a substantial access to the water. Again, lots of activity. You can see how it dips back in to on the shoreline there. This was where the log chain was. So the brails of logs were pushed into here, put on a chain, and pulled out of the river and into the mill. We would restore, pull those slopes back, pull those slopes back. These are the trees that are not likely savable. And you can envision, these are some imagery, what it might look like, not just all steps. So there's some softness, different types of rock. And you can see we'd put steps in there. There is a little bit of a beach area that we can preserve and some more steps on each side there. And you can see the trails continuing on behind there. And here's the road. This is the next version. And let me give you here's where we're at. You can see the street comes straight down here. And again, we're trying to preserve those views. So if you're out in the neighborhood, you're always looking down at the river, because that's a valuable asset when you're selling real estate, is to be able to have views of the river, even if it's just pulling out in your car and saying, gosh, that's beautiful. Just to the west of this is another area that's pretty heavily eroded. And the topography actually drops in here. And we were looking at it, it gives the opportunity to create, for lack of a better word, a grotto, where you've got the trail kind of coming by here, the PED trail coming by, and you can drop down, get into a little plaza here, a seat wall, a couple opportunities to get into the water. So you can see obviously the theme, shoreline stabilization, water access is what's occurring here. And the final topic of this presentation is the docks. Why are the docks appearing here? And one of the comments we heard during the master planning phase was no docks, no marinas, people can't afford that. I don't know that we were clear in some of those presentations that the idea of certainly this set of docks was the majority of it is day use docks, because folks want to be able to, you're out with your kids, you want to get off the water. You can do that at McEwen, and maybe that's it. Maybe you can go over to at the city beach, but that's a kind of a commercial dock. So providing opportunity to get off the water in that area. As we were exploring that with Bill mentioned that there is a demand for vendor docks. So instead of the boat docks, the rental agencies constantly running down to 3rd Street, dropping boats in and out, that there was a place for them to moor their boats overnight. So that seems like a reasonable idea, that you can create day-use docks and vendor boat slips, because now Parks and Rec is generating revenue off of those vendor boat slips. That's what would be envisioned here. It also supplements this commercial property, because now you have folks coming in there, let's pull in there, go up, have a beer, let the kids go to the bathroom, go off and go back onto the water. So it adds some value to this commercial parcel here, and also provides a potential revenue stream for the Parks Department, because you could lease those spaces to a vendor. The other end down here actually grew out of our steering committee. And one of the comments that we keep hearing, and it's valid, and Bill deals with it year in and year out, is these parks keep getting built, but the maintenance required to them is substantial. Staff has to be added. And I think this falls into the category that was recently talked about at council with parking. Do you pay through it with property taxes, or do you pay through it with user fees? One idea is to put annual lease slips in here. And for folks that lease slips on the lake, you know how expensive they are. You put 40 slips in there, and if it's $2,500, $3,000 a slip, you're generating $120,000 of revenue that can go into the Parks Department and fund maintenance of these. One option would be to add the day use slips here as well, but you can see they're literally an adder. Maybe that doesn't happen from the get-go, and the person that develops this commercial parcel here has some participation in it. But you can see the route would come through here. There'd be a pull-off area, again, an accessible route down to get onto the docks down here. This is about 14 vertical feet, so it's a little bit more of a challenge to get down there. So that is a relatively long, but hopefully sufficiently detailed and clear presentation of what the ideas currently are. Tonight at the open house, obviously we're here to answer questions. We're certainly here to hear your comments. You can tell us the comments. We'll try to remember them, but if you can write them down, there's comment cards. We actually have 4 different staff people here. Some of our administrative staff is here as well to help. But there's 3 different stations that have the big overview, just like this. We'll have a person each one of those and be able to go through that. After the open house, as Bill mentioned, email your comments to parks@cdaid.org and attend meetings. This is the list of the upcoming meetings. And I think Troy Tymason mentioned it earlier, is we're here to provide content and receive feedback. So that is our objective. That's all I have, Chairman.
Thank you, Phil.
You're welcome.
I think we'll kind of break it up and get out amongst you and take a look at everything.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you.